Welcome to a Leader's Journey podcast. I'm your host, Joel Gunn, and today I have Omar Garcia back with me. Omar, thanks for being back.
Thank you, Joel. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, our episode a few weeks ago was fun, and I wanted to kind of continue the conversation, but from a different perspective. For those that didn't see the previous show, I'd encourage you to go back and watch it. We talked about a little bit of Omar's background and then the selling side of selling a business. And just to kind of recap that, you've got your MBA, you've got a degree in electrical engineering, you were on the cover of a magazine as Next Generation Marketer of the Year, worked for some big brands, helped them grow, did some international deals, some M&A. Yeah, but the last 15 years, you've been a business broker selling businesses. I think you and I figured it up a while back. You've sold around 150 businesses or so. And so you've been on the seller side a lot, but I wanted to go to the I wanted to go to the buyer side, and I understand that's not an area that you represent. You always represent the seller, but if you were a buyer, put yourself in the buyer's shoes. Let's say you and I agreed we were going to go buy a company. With all the knowledge you have, what are the kind of things as a buyer I should be looking for, or what are the good things I should be looking for? What are the not so good things, or the red, if there's any red flags? Let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah. So if we step back for a second, sometimes people approach me and they say, "Hey, Omar, I want to buy a business." Okay. And I ask them, "In what industry?" "Oh, I don't know." "How big?" "I don't know." "How much cash flow?" "I don't know." So I think the first thing you have to think about is, what's a good fit for you? Mm-hmm. What's a business that you can add value to? Okay, is it a service business? Is it a manufacturing business? What is it? Mm-hmm. So that's the first step. So let's say that you have made a decision and you want a company in this or that industry. But now you have to realize that you might have to be flexible, because in a given market, like in San Antonio, there are usually like between 100 and 150 businesses for sale any given year. And those go from really, really, really tiny businesses to bigger businesses, let's say. Mm-hmm. At least the ones that are publicly listed that you could see. So the inventory is not that big. Mm-hmm. So there has to be a little bit of flexibility. Mm-hmm. Or you might be willing to relocate, and let's say a business like the one that you can add value to, well, it's available in Denver instead of in San Antonio. Mm-hmm. Are you willing to relocate? So those are decisions that the buyer has to make. So,
and you said a third one there was how much cash is it generating? And yeah. I would assume that's some sort of lifestyle question, perhaps, or is it more than that?
It's life, yeah, and it's also, let's think of an SBA loan type of business. Mm-hmm. So they're going to ask you to have enough for a down payment, and that's typically about 10% of the value of the business, and also a little bit of staying power, so a little more liquidity than that. Mm-hmm. So that would kind of dictate. So if you want to buy a business that is throwing out $500,000, and that's probably worth $1.5 million to $2 million, you got to have a down payment of $150,000 to $200,000 at least. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So.
Okay, and then let's say I've assessed the kind of business I could add value to, and got some flexibility on relocation, got some understanding of what kind of cash flow does it have to generate, one, to be able to repay the note, assuming I don't have the cash just to write a check. And then for me as the owner to take some sort of money out of, to feed my family. Where do we go from there? Is there a place I can go look to buy a business? Are there brokers that represent buyers? Like you always represent the seller side, but from the buying side, where do I go next?
Yeah, I mean, there's some brokers that represent buyers, and that might be a place to start. And there's some websites out there where you could see, they're almost like the MLS for real estate, that have most of the businesses for sale, but then they tend to be on the smaller side, like SBA type of businesses. If that's the range that you're looking for, that's what I would start.
Okay. And just for the audience that may not know, SBA has a limit of what size business they'll invest in.
Yeah, so the maximum that they'll loan is $5 million.
Okay.
But then you have a down payment of about 10%, and they're going to require the seller to seller finance probably another 10%.
Okay.
So you're talking about businesses up to $6-7 million that you could buy with an SBA loan.
Okay. And again, for those in the viewing audience that may not know, SBA stands for Small Business Administration. And that's where the federal government backs these loans through local banks, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. As a seller, what am I looking for in the health of a business? Either what are the good things I'm looking for, or what are the red flags? Or
as a seller, or
as a buyer. If I'm a buyer going in to buy, what are some of the initial things I should look for? Like if I were doing a quick assessment, like do I even want to spend more time on this? What are some of those first things I'm looking for?
Yeah. So let's say you want to buy a business in a plumbing company or in any industry. The steps that we follow are usually you contact me. If I have it for sale, then I'll ask you to sign a confidentiality agreement.
Okay.
We might talk a little bit before that, but I can't provide a lot of information beyond what's public. After you sign the confidentiality agreement, I will interview you. I want to know who you are, why you're wanting to buy a business, and if you're a good fit for this business. If you are, then I have a package that I'll share with you. If you're not, I'm not going to send you the package, even though you have signed a confidentiality agreement. Sometimes we get some buyers that get upset because we don't share the information with them, despite that they sign an NDA. Well, an NDA doesn't give you any rights. An NDA is just one step in the process.
I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah, so that's very, very important. Yeah, we work for the seller, at least in my practice, and we're fiduciary to the seller, meaning he is above us in anything and everything we do. We look for his best interest above our own. So I'm not going to be sending information out to people. I don't know who they are, even if they sign a piece of paper. Okay. Yeah.
So I've reached out. Either I found your listing on a website, or somehow I've connected with you and said, hey, I'm interested in buying. We've signed the NDA. You've interviewed me. You feel like there's an opportunity to maybe work together. As a buyer, what's kind of my next?
Yeah, so the next step is I would send you a package of a business, a SIM that has a description of the business. It has all the basic information and financials, 3 years of financials, recasted financials, so you know how much money the business makes to the owner and how we got to the price that we're selling the business. And then we'll probably have another conversation after that. And you'll probably have more questions. I'll ask for a list of questions, or I could set up a meeting with the seller. So something that we try to do is limit those meetings with the sellers because, I mean, they're running a business that they're pretty busy. So we only want to present to them like prime candidates that we believe have the potential to buy a business. Many times we get requests for meetings with the seller, and I just don't feel that the buyer is there. So we might not grant those either.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And now you've sent me the package. I'm looking through. We'll talk about the financials here in a second. The rest of the package talks about things like years in business, location, number of employees, maybe the kind of the industry trends or whatever. Is there anything I'm looking for in particular in there, or that would be you try to only represent healthy businesses, but not every business for sale out there may be going through a broker that is as diligent as you are, or may not be going through a broker at all. It just maybe I found a listing on one of those websites and it's for sale by owner. And so what, as a buyer, what are the kind of things that I'm looking for next?
Yeah, so you want to know what are the basics of the business, strengths, weaknesses, risk, opportunities, growth areas. You might want to know a little bit about the team, who are the key players, maybe not the name, but how long have they been with the business. You want to know the basics.
Is it appropriate at this point to start asking, like, how likely is that team to stay with the business, or is that later in the process?
Yeah, we get that question often, and the answer is, this is their job. This is what they know how to do. This is how they provide to their families. Mm-hmm. So, if there is someone there that we know that he wants to retire, we will disclose it, right? Mm-hmm. But for the most part...
Is it too early in the conversation for me as a buyer to ask that question, or is it okay to ask it kind of at this stage?
Yeah, you could ask those questions at this stage. Yeah. That's a different question from, I want to talk to the buyers.
Right.
And that we don't allow until the very, very last. Yeah.
Too early to talk to the sellers. Okay, so I've looked through the package. I've asked you questions about the team, the competitive landscape. If it's. I guess another question you and I were talking about before the show was this idea of landlords, and we can go there in a minute, but I at least need to understand if is the building being rented or leased. Would this be a good time to start asking questions about any intellectual property or trademarked, or is that too early to start asking those questions?
Yeah, no. At this point, you could ask any question, but the answers are informative.
Yeah, so there's less detail.
Less detail. Okay. So, do you have a price strategy? Yeah. Well, what's your competitive set? Well, we compete against these guys, and we tend to do this and that different than them. So, unless it's something that could put the businesses at risk, we could talk about it.
At least generically.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So kind of what's the next major hurdle then? Where as a buyer, where am I headed next?
So all of this is with intent for the buyer to evaluate if this is a good opportunity for them or not. Mm-hmm. The next step will be to make an offer. Okay. Now, sometimes some buyers, especially the ones that have less experience, want to do a lot of due diligence before making an offer.
Gotcha. Okay.
And my comment to them is, think of it as a hypothesis. Okay, so we're saying the business is worth $5 million, right? And you're telling me you don't have enough information to prove that it's worth $5 million. Well, not right now, but you'll have to do diligence to prove for that. And I can't give you everything that you want unless I know you're going to place an offer that my seller would accept. It doesn't make any sense for me to share information with you or the seller if we don't know what you're going to offer. Okay? So that's kind of the basis. So the hypothesis is that it's worth $5 million. You'll get to prove that hypothesis, and we'll give you some basic information to support it at this stage.
So kind of that next major milestone then would be, is letter of intent the right offer?
Yeah.
The right wording?
An LOI will be appropriate, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to do a letter of intent which said, based on what I've discovered so far, which is at this point usually only a few hours of information exchange, I intend to make a final offer, but now I want to get into due diligence. So I'd write up, I intend to, assuming all this is true, I'd be interested in paying this. The deal might look something like this. This is my time frame, and some of those other standard things in a letter of intent.
I'm sorry. The other important element of the letter of intent are the contingencies.
Okay.
Okay, which are typically, if you do the due diligence and you discover that something is not right, then you have the right to get out. I mean,
And could that be like, I'm just not getting warm fuzzies and I can walk away?
yes.
Okay.
Anything. I mean, you typically have a period of time like 4 weeks, 6 weeks,
Okay.
and for any reason, you could get out. Yeah. Or if the financing is not there,
Falls
you
through.
can't, you could get out. So those are doors for the buyer to get out of the deal.
Okay.
Some of these deals have earnest money. The seller wants earnest money. And our approach is typically that money belongs to the buyer. I mean, we're in the business of selling businesses, not of keeping the buyer's earnest money.
Yeah.
So even if what I advise always the seller is just give the money back, even if they pass the 6 weeks or whatever that period was.
As long as it's within reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, have you ever seen the potential buyer put in too many contingencies or too many criteria? In their letter
I
of
mean,
intent?
the letter of intent is negotiated, so it's not a one-way document. So we get it, we review it. Sometimes they take it to their attorney, sometimes they take it to their CPA, and and when we add to it, we take things out and we negotiate it.
Right.
And it's supposed to be like the tip of the pyramid of what the final document or legal documents are going to be. It's like the basic terms.
Yeah. So it starts to set the direction this is going to go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then I guess there's the due diligence period as part of that. And then the final milestone is there just one final milestone, or is there several little ones to get you to
So typically there are 3 things that need to happen, and it could happen at the same time. It could happen one after the other, or 2 at the same time and 1 later. One of them is a due diligence, and then you have financial due diligence, legal due diligence. Those are the typical ones that we see. There might be intellectual property if that were the case, but so that's one of the path that we have to follow. The other one is the financing, getting the financing in place, and then the legal part, just getting all the documents and contracts and reaching an agreement on the legal language for this deal. And there's some other little things that might be happening on the side. I mean, if you have a franchise, does it need franchise approval?
Right.
Or landlord, does it need landlord approval? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so finally we get to the closing. Before we get to closing, though, we covered this from the seller perspective in the last episode a few weeks ago. This is at best kind of a 5-month deal, and at worst way beyond that, but kind of 5 to 9 months is typical horizon that all this plays out when it's all said and done. So
I'd rather say 6 or 12, just to give myself a little more time.
Yeah. And so everything comes together. We get to close. Is it typical for the buyer to expect the seller to hang around in the kind of deals you do?
Yeah. So the business is not conveyed until the seller receives the cash, right?
Okay.
So you sign all the documents, but it's not your business until he gets paid.
Yeah.
So that's something important. And typically there is a transition period, depending on the complexity of the business, could be from 4 weeks to 3 months
Okay.
or more. And then after that, most sellers are comfortable with call me at any time.
Mm-hmm.
So how we see this is that at the beginning, the seller is really, really involved, teaching them how to get things done,
Mm-hmm.
introducing clients, introducing the team. But as time goes, the buyers want to drive the business
Mm-hmm.
more and more and more, and then the sellers kind of go more into the background until they become like a phone call away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, what we have seen most of the times is that the buyers will replicate what the seller is doing for at least a year.
Mm.
But we have also seen some that they buy the business and want to change everything,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them have run into trouble.
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, for being too aggressive,
Yeah.
not knowing the business well, not having the relationships in place, and just try to rock the boat too hard, too fast. Yeah.
So this is kind of just a fun question. I'm sure you've driven down the street and you've seen under new management, or new owners or whatever. You think that, especially with your marketing background, generally a good idea or generally a bad idea?
Generally a bad idea.
Okay. Yeah.
Unless the business went belly up and then you want to say, hey, we're better than the guys
previous,
before.
yeah.
But no, yeah.
So a Chinese restaurant moving into an old Chinese restaurant might want to make it clear that they're new, right?
Correct.
But otherwise, probably not a good idea.
Not a good idea at all.
Okay, so just kind of as we start to land the plane here, where have you seen deals blow up, or if I'm a buyer or a seller that's never been really involved in this transaction before, what areas do things tend to come off the rails most easily? Maybe it didn't totally blow up, but give me some expectations. So whether, especially in the buyer side, where should I be alert to? Because you're coaching your sellers through, right? That's the advantage of them hiring a broker. But as a buyer, I may not have anybody other than a CPA to help me look at numbers and a lawyer to help negotiate the deal or the final contract. But I don't have anybody holding my hand through the process. Most of the time, I would guess. Most people don't deal through brokers as on the buyer side. So what are some of the things I need to be alert to or emotionally prepared that might slow things down or take them off the rails?
I mean, I have a friend that says that every closing is a miracle.
Well, that's not very comforting.
And it truly is. Let me tell you that it's hard. It's very hard selling a business. It's a lot harder than I thought when I got into this industry.
Yeah.
But I mean, what have we seen?
Yeah, where do the deals normally get hung up?
Legal might be
that.
one of them.
Yeah.
So both sides being too protective.
Okay.
So ideally has to be 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
Both sides have to take somewhat of a risk.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be an issue.
And is it better to get the lawyer involved sooner? Because as a buyer, I may not want to write those big checks for paying a lawyer per hour. But also if I wait and I don't tell my lawyer anything until we're at the 9 out of 10 steps, and they go, oh, hey, I need your legal review. There's got to be a trade-off there of waiting too long and paying too much.
I mean, yeah. I mean, time kills deals.
Okay.
So if you take a long time, we kind of lose momentum, and the seller might get frustrated and say, hey, why am I selling? I'm making good money in this business.
Yeah, I've been thinking about selling it for several years.
Yeah, wait a little longer.
Yeah.
So we had some occasions where the seller, they get cold feet last minute.
It's their baby and they don't want to let it go.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I like doing the deals where we do due diligence, legal, and the lending all at the same time. That's how I like it, because I like things moving.
Sure.
But we've had some deals where they're very methodical. They do one, then they do the due diligence, then they do the loan, and then they do the attorney. But the problem with that is it takes forever. It might take 6 months to close a deal. And
Just that stage of it.
yeah, well, yeah, they're going one after the other.
Yeah.
So, yeah, people do get frustrated.
So is it, in your experience and opinion, is it better to involve the lawyer a little sooner than most buyers do?
I think so. Yeah. And you might want to start doing the bank portion and the due diligence at the same time, so at least you get some momentum.
Okay.
And then the legal piece could wait at the end, or you could do it in parallel too. Yeah.
So what you say legal's often where it goes off the rails. What usually is the hang up in the legal side? Is it in the minutia, or is it usually this big thing that blows the whole thing up?
Yeah. And I would hesitate to say that legal is where things go bad. Not all of them. I mean, the few that go bad, some of them are because of the legal side. And it has to do with the legal language, reps and warranties. I mean, both sides are being overly protective. Yeah.
So as the buyer, that lawyer technically works for me, and as the seller, their lawyer technically works for them. But we're also counting on them as the professionals to protect me from harm. So do you ever see where the lawyers actually polarize the situation to where now I'm almost, we're working against the deal instead of getting a deal done?
So most of the issues that we see when things go bad on the legal side is because one or both of the attorneys don't have M&A experience.
Okay.
Because if you have a transaction attorney, and we work with several of them, I mean, they're doing hundreds of deals in a year. I mean, they're closing a couple of them every week.
Okay.
So they know what it takes and what's normal and customary.
What's fair.
Yeah. So if on both sides you have guys like that, it's likely that it will close. I mean, you might still have a seller or a buyer that feels concerned and derail the whole thing, right? But
that's a different topic.
But the attorneys, they know what they're doing. Yeah. I mean, it's like a race car driver. He knows how to take that curve number 4 because he's done it 100 times. But if you have
still a risk.
Yeah. But if you have an attorney that is not used to doing this, he might crash the car right there.
Yeah, good point. I like that. That's a great analogy. And okay, so attorneys, legal's one. We mentioned landlord earlier. Have you ever seen deals that maybe they don't ultimately fail, but they get a little delayed or sidetracked dealing with landlords?
Yeah, I mean, depends on the business. We sold a business several years ago that had 5 locations in very high-end malls. And all these malls had landlords that were publicly traded REITs.
Yeah.
So it took like months to get their approval for the new buyer, right? Yeah, I mean...
So if I'm paying cash, I still have to get the landlord to approve.
You still have to,
If I'm going SBA, I got to get the landlord, definitely got to get the landlord to approve, because SBA requires like a 10-year agreement, right, with landlords?
The SBA will require that you have a lease and enough options for the length of the loan.
Okay.
And the length of the loan tends to be 10 years.
10 years, okay. And if I'm doing private equity, the landlord still matters, right?
Yeah.
So I can't, if there's a landlord involved, I can't get out of not talking to the landlord.
That's right.
Okay. And so, I could see how a deal would get delayed, definitely, with those larger landlords.
And in some cases, you have some landlords that want to take advantage of the situation and
raise the rates.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So that...
Now it changes the numbers. Now you got to recast everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm glad we had that conversation. That's
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you have surprises that you didn't expect, and that might throw a monkey wrench into a deal. You might lose, and the business might lose a key client as we're in the process of selling.
Yeah.
Or he might hear that he might lose a client. He hasn't lost it yet, but he knows, and we got to disclose it to the buyers, right?
Yeah.
So we had that happen once many, many years ago. We've had also that if it's an SBA deal that the SBA sends, they're required to do a valuation, a third-party valuation, and they're having occasions where they come too low. And then we have to talk to the appraiser and understand where is the disconnect. I mean,
do you have to convince that particular appraiser, or can you bring in another appraiser?
What we've done is, I mean, we talk to the appraiser and we tell him why we think this is the right number, and we provide our support. It doesn't happen often. I think it has happened to us once or twice. In both cases, we're able to prevail.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm glad you're sharing those numbers, because, like, I think buyers and sellers need to be aware of that this could happen, but out of 150 transactions, it's happened once or twice, right? Like, it's not a 10% of the time or 50% of the time.
No.
So, any other like, what's my mindset? Is the buyer's mindset got to be different than the seller's mindset, or is there just this general? Obviously I want to be positive. Obviously I want to do due diligence, but is there a mindset or an attitude that you've seen take deals off the rails that I could prepare for up front? Check my own heart, check my own attitude.
Well, I mean, what we try to do is we hate surprises, because surprises are precisely what are going to kill the deals. So if we know that something is not ideal, we disclose it right away. I mean, we don't want to waste time.
For sure.
So if this is an issue for you, then we want you to know that this key employee is going to retire next year. So you're not surprised. And you let me know if you want to continue or not ASAP, right?
Yeah.
So we like to disclose all of that as soon as possible. We have had issues with numbers where we didn't know that they were that messy. The P&Ls look good, but once you look into the hood, they were very, very messy.
Dig into the QuickBooks or whatever.
And the buyers were surprised because nobody knew. The seller didn't tell us. The bookkeeper that they had didn't tell us, so it was a surprise.
But generally speaking, you're able to get most deals done if both parties are being reasonable.
Most deals done, and I think we only have had one deal go bad years and years ago, and the reason was the buyer changed everything as he walked into the business. And but most deals are successful. Yes.
And I think you mentioned this before we got on the air, or right at the beginning of this episode, but it'd be worth bringing back up either way. The buyers that walk into deals and try to change it on day one, generally a bad idea. Yeah. But probably, I would assume there's some sort of window, 90 days to a year, they can start making changes, usually with low impact, because now they've understood a little bit about how the business runs.
Because of my marketing background, I've seen where I leave a brand that's growing 20, 30% a year, and the next marketer, day one, changes everything and screw things up, even in a large corporation. So I have come to believe that is part of the human condition, that walking in, you want to put your handprints on it. Even if you come from the same industry, it's a really bad idea to make changes really, really quick.
Right.
How fast, I can't tell you. Usually what we recommend is just keep doing the same thing or make incremental, small changes, or unless it's something really, really obvious that needs to be tweaked, just don't do it. Yeah.
Especially the ones that directly affect the customer.
Correct. Or key employees. Yeah,
that's good.
So you're going to remove all the benefits. Well, wait.
If you're going to change the way you do your accounting with your accountant, probably nobody cares if you change that next week. But you're going to change the benefits to the employees. You probably want to earn some rapport and some trust.
Or you're going to change the recipes if it's a restaurant or so. It's a bad idea.
Probably want to do a taste test first.
Or if you're going to change the way you do marketing. I mean, it has been working. This is what you bought. It's been working. Just don't make radical changes. Do tests. That's okay.
Test,
did some testing.
That's good. Omar, as we wrap up this episode, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that buying a business it's a great opportunity. If I had to do it all over again, I would probably buy a business instead of starting a business from scratch. It's less risk, it's less stressful, but you have to be careful. Have you change things, and try to be very conservative in the way that you manage that business at the beginning, and slowly make an impact.
So the old proverb, walk a mile in their shoes first?
Exactly. Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, that's some good advice you've shared during the show. Appreciate that. And just for the record, it's not legal advice from either you or me. No. Always get professional help.
Yeah, exactly. We're not getting paid here.
That's right. All right. Thanks, Omar.
Thanks, Joe.
Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of A Leader's Journey podcast. If you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up and remember to subscribe to our channel.